Here's what I've been thinking about this week
Okay, here,
is
hit me.
we just brought in a ton of college talent, like 100 kids joined straight out of college. And there's this talk track that's going on as I'm talking to like my business leaders and I'm hearing from other business leaders is this idea about grit and passion and work ethic in the
Grit.
young workforce today. But grit seems to be, I remember like 10 years ago, this was the thing everybody talked about. And it seems to be back, wondering like, where is the work ethic and the grit and the grind? And it feels like that's the talk of the town these days is where did it go? Young kids these days not having the work ethic of parents from the 1950s and things like that. Are you hearing that? Is that just me?
Grit's the new buzzword, huh?
Grit is it. It's back.
Uh,
It's back.
does it feel like it's yeah? It feels like that's always the cycle, right? It's like people are saying, "Hey, it used to be like this." Kids these, I mean, is it just like a kids these days kind of thing that
It's
you're
got to
hearing?
be. I feel like yeah, when you and I came in, we're both in the millennial. Where I'm sure that's what they talked about when we came in. That like,
Elder
where's the
elder
grit?
millennial, elder
Elder
millennial.
millennials. I know that 4 year bucket. Um, but no, I think the same thing said. Like we were entitled when we came in. We didn't work as hard. We didn't have to go through what other generate. Maybe it is generational.
Yeah, I I feel like what people are really saying is, or maybe what maybe older people don't understand when they're looking and thinking that younger people don't have grit is maybe it's that, is it like the job hopping phenomenon? Like they feel like they're not like committed to something. Just that old
Like,
that idea of like you have a job, you stay forever, and that is just 100% the opposite mentality of like today's workforce of
I
Gen
think
Z
so.
specifically.
And that's been happening for years. Like I remember when millennials were coming in, we stayed less than 5 years, and that was shocking to stay for less
Yeah,
than 5 years at a company. And now it's like 18 months, 2 years if you're lucky.
and you get a good pay bump if you move typically.
Well, and that's why, yeah, you're getting 15, 20% if you're moving from job to job. So what's the benefit for me to stay internally if I'm not getting that?
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder what's like a okay. So we were talking about talent development earlier. What's like the can you instill grit in somebody? If people are like complaining about this, if they're like, "Oh, okay, like these people coming in don't have the grit to like work hard and stay long." Like can you develop that? Is that like a internal quality that you either have it or you don't? Can you create that quality in somebody?
I feel like if it's a nature versus nurture debate,
Yeah.
my opinion would be that it's definitely nurtured. Like somebody has to show you that. What we're seeing in like when you're talking about the workforce, you're assuming someone's parents instilled that in them from a young age. And so now when they're 18 or 25 or 40 coming to work for you, they've got the grit already. Somebody's already
Right.
taught them to work hard and showed them this is how you get there. And they've taken that and put that into how they show up to work every day. And so, if that's the argument, I would say that 100%, if somebody's never had that before, like maybe no one showed them the value of hard work, that if they're 18 or 25 or 40 and they're not showing it, of course you could nurture it. If they
Yeah.
could learn it when they were 5, why couldn't they learn it when they were 30?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's almost like, and not to dog on the old people like us. I'm gonna include us in the old
We're old
crowd.
now, man. We're old.
Is maybe what we're really saying is we don't have the right systems in place to develop grit in these people, or we don't have what it takes. I mean, it's almost like a, and that's just always my mindset is like, how do I flip this onto myself? How do I, if I'm looking at somebody and complaining about them, it's like, how do I flip this? How do I make this about what I'm offering? The things that I can actually control. I can't control whether these young people coming in my organization have grit or not, but do I have the capacity to develop grit in somebody? Do I have that? Do I have what it takes to actually teach somebody how to have that, how to develop that, what that looks like? Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you feel like you guys have something like that, or do you know what that looks like?
Well, I think that's the hardest thing, right? Like, so if I've come up and I worked hard, I was working 50, 60 hours a week coming in to grind my way to rise the corporate ladder. By the time I'm now old enough to look at a younger generation coming in and going, they need to work hard. I'm also pretty tired. The irony of this is if the answer is leaders, more experienced folks in the workforce need to teach others and show them grit and like nurture that in them,
Yeah.
they've got to actually, if the litmus test for grit is like working hard, long hours, grinding out like rigorous approach to work, you need to model that for them. And if
Yeah.
you've been in your career for 10 years, 15 years, the longer you're in your career, the more tired you get. And so like
Right.
your capacity to grind it out with the younger workforce coming in is like, well, I want them to do it because I had to do it, but I'm also too tired to do it now. And so
Yeah.
now maybe I don't teach it. Where in reality, all you've got to do is stay late, show them the grind that you want to put in and show them this is how you do it and this is how you succeed. And they don't know any better. They will learn from you and they will show you that this is the way. And so part of it is like that behavior, that grit has to be modeled by somebody. And if
Yeah.
you're the one looking going, they don't have any grit, you got to look in the mirror and say, am I showing them what it looks like, what the behavior is that I'm expecting? And if not, maybe that's the part of the problem.
Yeah. I don't I I don't see a scenario where you can learn grit. The more I say the word, the weirder. It's one of those words that the more times I say it, it sounds weird. But you're not going to learn grit from a training manual or from a book.
No.
Someone out there is going to turn the word grit into an acronym and be like, here's how to have grit. You have to get after it. Recall your purpose. Whatever. I can't think of an I and a T. But yeah, it's modeling. It's exactly what you're saying. You learn by experience, by really seeing somebody do that, and have that mentality, and you learn from them. I think you're right. It's a learn by doing. It's a learn from modeling. It's from your environment, which is that back to that nurturing that you mentioned. I do think, specifically when we're talking about restaurants and restaurant managers, it feels like this idea of grit, of having like the ability to work hard, to be committed, to dig deep, and to maybe lead by example, work when you're tired, whatever that might be, however we define grit. It is almost like one of the top qualities of like a great restaurant manager. I don't know, like what do you think?
I mean, I would argue that restaurant managers are the hardest workers on the planet right now.
Yeah.
If you think about from a time perspective, like there's no downtime in a restaurant from the time you clock in to the time you clock out. They're working hard. They've got to smile for customers and guests while working collaboratively with the team. Like there's no one person restaurant crew. And
Right.
so, like, if you've made it to a manager and you're running a shift as a manager in a restaurant, you've got to smile and be happy for guests. You've got to be collaborative in a team environment while working for 8 to 10 hours straight. And if you could do that consistently, like, there's not many jobs on the planet that require 8 to 10 hours straight of grind and collaboration and smiling and being happy. So
Yeah.
I can think of another job that models it more than a restaurant manager.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I and when you see that in a restaurant manager, you tend to promote them, or they get hired by somebody else. Right?
Which
Uh,
is the name of the game. Like the
yeah,
great ones, the ones that can do that are in demand. They're in the highest
yeah,
demand in the industry.
yeah, absolutely.
I was
The
reading this an article from it was like March of this year in
Okay.
Restaurant Business Magazine, and it was talking about the value of a general manager.
Hmm.
Um and talking about the lengths that brands are going to. And it mentioned like Panera and some other brands that were doing like crazy retention strategies of retention bonuses for managers that stayed, or even like some are giving a share of profit to general managers to stay because all of the data they had showed that restaurant managers, a great general manager, was able to retain their workforce longer. Sales were better and the margins were better. So the longer a great general manager stayed in place, the better all three of those things were, which makes total sense. And it's fascinating that like that's the catalyst that everybody's focusing on. But a lot of it was also focused on recruiting them from other brands, not developing them from within.
Hmm. So it felt like most of their strategies were about finding somebody and bringing them in, someone who they feel like is like ready to go.
Exactly. Like, yeah, like praying that somebody else had done this. Let me see if this works.
Praying that somebody else had done the development that they aren't willing to do for their own
Exactly.
team.
Exactly. Like hopefully this other brand trained them well because I just need somebody to run it, but I don't have
Yeah.
any of those people. So I'm gonna go over to whoever's in this article, um, and hope that they did it well. But you can
Yeah.
see like El Pollo Loco, their CEO is even saying like the GM's the heart of the restaurant. But it's all about recruitment. Like the whole article focuses on everything they're doing to recruit. And then
Mm.
motivation is all like compensation. So recruit people and pay them well. And they talk about this a little bit. But there was no strategies here. It's just like, hey, it's really important to get people to climb the ladder, but know how, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So it's about recruiting. Well, it's about the importance of the general manager, which is so goes the manager, so goes the restaurant, right? Like,
100%. Yep.
and it's about recruiting and compensation, but not about how to actually develop people and create the type of manager that you need.
That's right. I mean, we were at a brand that focused on developing, and one of the um, requirements to get promoted was to train your replacement. And it was like, if
Yeah.
you think KPIs, like yes, you've got food safety, you've got sales, you've got labor cost and food cost, but then it was also people development metrics, and it was like, hey, yes, all of those things, and you can't get to the next level until you've trained other people as well
Yeah.
as KPI for success.
And there's also just something I want to say intangible, but it's not intangible because it is tangible about doing that as well. Like just the personal value of like actually seeing someone that you developed, that you helped grow, and seeing them move into a position of leadership and seeing them be successful. That's irreplaceable. That's invaluable. You know what I mean? Just instead of just like anybody can go and hire somebody, great. I mean, there's also a lot of skill to hiring, and it takes some work. But I feel like it's a lot more work and a lot more rewarding to develop people and see
Yeah,
somebody internally be successful. There's just a lot more personal satisfaction out of that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's why people do it. That's why they grow into those leadership positions. It's less like some of it's compensation, but it comes with a
yeah,
whole lot more responsibility. So the other value aside from comp is growing and developing people and seeing that.
yeah.
To
And
bring
like
it
you
full
mentioned,
circle,
yeah.
oh, good.
Well, I was gonna say, as you mentioned, we saw that happen at Chipotle when we were there. Um, we're seeing that with some of the brands that we're working with currently. Um, and what do you think? I guess I was going to ask you, what do you think is sort of the common trend between brands that really put an emphasis on developing internally versus like just trying to find somebody to fill a role? Like, what is it? Is it like they have a strong culture, they have a strong belief? Like what?
I think that's it. Like to me, it's they believe there's a way that they want it done. Like
Yeah,
you could recruit somebody else to manage a restaurant, to manage the operations, which means there will be bodies in the building, food will get prepared, it will get served to customers, and we will maintain a decent profit margin while doing all of that. I feel like that's the general litmus test. The question or the answer that most brands have is like, hey, I want that done in a specific way. I want all of that done in a way where people feel nurtured and cared for, or in a way where it's fun and loose and happy. Like we've seen brands where the whole vibe of the restaurant matters. And the vibe is like not just the music and the lighting in the restaurant, but like the way people are allowed to show up, where maybe it's looser uniform standards, or the
yeah,
way that they talk to each other isn't so formal and corporate. That's the
yeah,
culture. That's the way they want it done. And you can't just hire somebody in to do that. Because if they came from another brand that doesn't believe in that, they're going to feel really weird coming into this culture. And so the ones that believe in that go, I can't hire that general manager from the outside because they don't believe what we believe. So I got to grow it from within. I got to teach it from the ground up by the time they get to the general manager. So I do feel like culture is that common denominator.
yeah. if you have something that you consider special, if you have a mission driven brand, if you have something unique, creating people from within that believe in that understand that, are on board with the vision, is the strongest way to build that mindset, to build that culture, is homegrown every time.
Absolutely. Which to bring it full circle, this dawned on me like 2 minutes ago as you were saying it, but like if grit is the thing you're looking for,
Yeah.
what's ironic in a restaurant is like it's part of just the grind of the setup of the frontline worker. Like it's part of the work day to day. And it's funny if you think about literally any other company in the world, if they're looking to instill grit, maybe that's the place to look, is your frontline workforce, the youngest workers coming in. Does the environment that they're coming into require them to put in the work, or are they allowed to kind of slack off and be passive? Because in a restaurant, you're required to work hard and put in the hours and put in the time before you get to the manager level, before you get to the general manager level. So it's already vetted. By the time you get there, you know they're gritty, you know they're working hard, and they put in the work ethic. Maybe that's the answer to it, as we were talking about earlier, of like, you kind of have to model it for people in the restaurant industry. It's baked in from the start.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's like, if those people have, if somebody coming in an entry level position is it's being modeled for them, this grit is being modeled, but they also have an environment where they feel supported. You know what I mean? Where it's not just like, we're gonna work you to the bone, we're gonna grind. Maybe the last, maybe the I and the T in grit is inspiration and trust.
Whoa, you did it.
To round it out. They have to feel inspired. They have to feel like they got a little bit of trust, because just like a lot of hard work and grind and without kind of that support, leads to burnout. But if you round it out with that feeling of safety and trust, and knowing that it's a place that will support you, and has your best intentions in mind and wants you to succeed, that's next level.
I think that's it. I think we answered our own question, which is great, because now my mind can be at peace
Wow.
from where we started.
Okay. Oh, and we're at 18 minutes. I think it's time to wrap up this, whatever this is, this simplified podcast that we have.
The Simplified podcast. Cue the music. Great talking to you, Matt.
All right. I'll catch you later.